Now the time has come for the final segment of our conference, Secret Diplomacy, Diverse Ways to Rescue Jews. Our moderator will be Hanna Radziejowska, the head of the Berlin branch of the Pilecki Institute. Hanna is also coordinator, curator, producer and scriptwriter of both cultural and museum projects. Hanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I feel honored to moderate this discussion with such wonderful guests. So welcome to the next part of our international conference on the role of diplomats in saving Jews during the Second World War, duty and compassion, Polish diplomacy, working against the Holocaust, secret diplomacy, diverse ways to rescue Jews. With our conference, we have opened the year of Ładoś that commemorates the activities of Polish diplomats in Switzerland. In the afternoon, we discussed the political dimension, the role of governments and politics in saving Jews. And this part of our discussion will have the opportunity to talk about several specific cases of Polish rescue operations. In the last few years, I would say 3 years, many interesting cases of actions by Polish diplomats have come to light, such as the most famous and discussed one, the Ładoś group in Bern, Switzerland. But in recent months, the activities of the consul in Istanbul, Wojciech Rychlewicz, have been uncovered. The activities of Tadeusz Romer and the pre-war activities of Consul Hyczewski in Leipzig are also being mentioned more and more frequently. And before we reflect with our wonderful guests, experts on the ways in which Polish diplomatic missions rescued Jews or tried to rescue Jews, on the specific of each activity, I would like to introduce our wonderful experts. So first, Olga Barbasiewicz, professor at the Institute of Middle and Far East of the Jagiellonian University in Kraków. She was awarded with a Ministry of Science and Higher Education Scholarship for Outstanding Young Scholars. In her current research, she focuses on memory politics, Japanese-Korean relations and migration studies in wartime East Asia, Japan, Shanghai. She was also a curator of international exhibitions. She is an author and editor of numerous books and articles like Post-War Reconciliation in Central Europe and East Asia, the case of Polish, German and Korean-Japanese relations. She is also an author with Peter Lang, a book, Polish Ambassador to Japan, Tadeusz Romer and Jewish War Refugees in the Far East. It was published by Polish Institute in Vilna. Eldad Beck. Eldad Beck is a Berlin-based journalist and author. He studied Arabic and Islam at the Sorbonne University in Paris. He was Middle East Affairs correspondent of the IDF radio and the newspaper Hadashot. He was Paris-based correspondent of the IDF radio, the Jerusalem Report, the Jerusalem Post, and Israel's Channel 2. He was also a project coordinator for an Austrian governmental organization. Between 2000 and 2002, he was Vienna-based correspondent of the Israeli daily Maariv. From 2002 till 2016, he was German and Central Europe correspondent of the Israel daily Yediot Achronot, Since 2017, he's the Europe correspondent of the daily Israel Hayom. It's the most circulating newspaper in Israel. Bernd Karwen graduated in German as a foreign language, Polish studies and political science from the Leipzig University. He complemented his studies in Warsaw since 1999. An employee of the Polish Institute in Leipzig. Since 2008, it is a branch of the Polish Institute in Berlin. He has worked, among others, on historical projects such as the commemoration of the Solidarity Movement, Polen Action, Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Warsaw Rising. He's also a member of the Scientific Council of the Weimar Meetings with History. He runs various projects pertaining to literature program for the Leipzig Book Fair, music and dialogue. It's Leipzig European Forum, so it's an annual debate on the problems of the European Union. And he translated Mieczysław Weinberg's biography into German. And at last but not least, my colleague Monika Maniewska, a historian, archivist, and she graduated of the Faculty of History of the Nicolaus Copernicus University in Toruń. She's a co-author of the publication, the Ładoś List, and she is also a manager of the archives acquisition team at the Pilecki Institute in Warsaw, and generally Pilecki Institute. I would like to end this introduction with a small but important remark. Of course, everyone is welcome to ask questions. They can be entered in this Q&A section. So it's located on the bottom taskbar on the right. Yes, okay, so our conversation will focus on some extraordinary and still relatively little known Polish diplomats who were working before and during the war in Leipzig, Tokyo, Bern, and Istanbul. And I would like to begin with some quotation. In Black Earth, Tim Snyder quotes Hannah Arendt. It's a very nice sentence. The first step on the road to total domination is to kill the legal person in man. And another sentence, you can only do what you like with stateless people. Snyder writes about the role of state destruction in the realization of genocide, and at the same time, he points to diplomats as those who, by granting false papers, documents, could have helped to save the Jews. And I would like to start by asking everyone, asking our guests to introduce the characters, figures you are researching and dealing with. And the first is Bernd. The first such step towards the apocalypse was stripping the privation of German citizenship for 17,000 Polish Jews. In October 1938, that was the so-called Polen Action. This Polen Action was carried out, and Polish-German Jews were detained in Zbąszyn. So at this point, I would like to ask Bernd about the role of Consul Hiczewski and his activities in Leipzig. What was the story behind the Consul Hiczewski operation? How, why did Hiczewski act? Bernd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hanna, for having me. Good evening from Leipzig. We started the commemoration of Felix Hiczewski in the year of 2000. So it's quite a long time ago. And then further on, there were different projects about his deeds, about his duty and compassion. But the case is a little bit more complicated because it all started from, it started, of course, from German deprivation of Jews in the German Reich. But further on, the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs wanted to strip Polish Jews, for example, in Germany, but in the world, also in Austria, for example, from their citizenship to avoid them to come back to Poland. This had different reasons. Sometimes they were quite acculturated to German culture, so they lived in Germany for second generation, but also the ministry was not was quite anti-Semitic. We have to admit that. And there's a quotation of a meeting in the Polish embassy in Berlin in 1938, where it's pointed out that the law about the possibility of stripping Polish people of their citizenship, it is said, the text isn't saying it directly, but this is also to prevent mass remigration of Polish Jews to Poland. As historian Jerzy Tomaszewski put it, this all took place in the time of preludium of Holocaust. So no one knew at that time what's gonna happen later on, I think. At least no one could know that at that time. And it was one of the first steps. So in October 1938, maybe it's worth mentioning that there was the conference of Evian in the meantime, called by President Roosevelt, which was also about Jews, stateless Jews, and countries were to declare their willingness to accept them as refugees in their country. And there were 34 states present in Evian, and only the Dominican Republic allowed Jews to migrate there. So, and then this was about July 1938. In October 1938, this Polish law came into force, and so the role of diplomats actually should have been, by intention of the Foreign Ministry of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Warsaw, to make it impossible for Polish Jews to come back or to migrate to Poland. And the German Reich got some information about that and planned the so-called Polen-Aktion, so an action on Polish Jews, practically. And in the night from 27th to 28th of October, they made Jews in the whole German Reich emigrate. So that was a first deportation action. And as it is reported, some Jews in Leipzig had about 20 minutes or 60 minutes to take their most important things, and then they were forced to go. This took place in the whole German Reich, so Polish consulates in Berlin, Frankfurt am Main, Munich, also Breslau, I think, got information about this. And there's one thing which made it possible for Liepzig. He knew a little bit earlier than others knew, or to put the other way around, Leipzig was a little bit late. So Liepzig warned the Jews and asked them to come to the Polish consulate. And in effect, 1,296 Jews went to the Polish consulate. You can see the building still today, and you can imagine that there must be, strong conditions, because it was very many people on a small space, and he gave them just the possibility to stay there. It is reported that one woman died of heart attack in these circumstances, and Liepzig achieved some things, so Jews could go back at least for some time, for some days, back to their homes and settle there. Well, they could prepare. he achieved also that ill and elder Jews were a little bit spared, and he achieved that Jews who were about to migrate somewhere could do so. As you mentioned in the beginning, in the most cases, it led to this, that Jews stayed or got stuck in the no man's land between Poland and Germany, close to Zbąszyn, and they were there for some time under poor conditions, and later on their situation was settled. We know a little bit about Liepzig because former Gauleiter Mutschmann at that time wrote later on a report to the Auswärtiges Amt, and he somehow complained that Liepzig did too much to help the Jews. And he also, there was a doubtful question whether the consulate is an extraterritorial place or not. So did he write or didn't he do right? And also Mutschmann complained about Liepzig, who told them to burn their passports. So this was the opposite to that what happened later in the Wardosh group was to provide passports. In this case, it was helpful to not to have a passport. Maybe a few words about commemoration in Leipzig. We don't know too much actually about the fate of Liepzig, but he stayed in Leipzig for some time. He was interned when war started in 1939, and then somehow he managed to get to France, where he helped Polish refugees in Toulouse. He received a Polish medal in 1946, I think, for his work. I don't know why exactly. It was just, you know, for effective and good work as a diplomat. So he received this medal in 1946, and he quit service in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1952 and stayed in France, where he died in Digne in 1972. So in the end, we know there were letters of gratitude later on from Jews who had been helped by Liepzig. So his help was not, in some cases it was effective, but we can imagine that he couldn't help everybody from getting caught in other countries, in Poland, of course, but also in other European countries. Some made it to France or the Netherlands and were deported from there later on.
So I would like to add one more question. So was this action carried out with the knowledge of the Polish government, or how did it work? I mean,
well, it was just about a few days, and I think he did not consult his decision to help these people with Warsaw or even with Berlin. I'm not sure about that. I've never found any information about that. But when we talk about duty and compassion, and having in mind this Polish legislation before, he rather acted, he fulfilled his duty to be human as to be, you know, someone who puts the right seal as the government wanted. So this was rather his decision, maybe also a decision of his team to act like this, to help, instead of asking for permission to help. And well, he also, of course, he did not ask the German authorities for for any permission.
Perhaps there are still many things to research in this story. Thank you very much for this introduction to Chyczewski history. And now Olga Barbasiewicz, our tour of Polish diplomatic missions began in Leipzig, and now I would like to move to Tokyo. And Dr. Olga Barbasiewicz, could you explain this role of Tadeusz Romer in the action to save Polish and Lithuanian Jews? So what were the specifics of his operation? How did he act? I usually hear about the story of Consul Sugihara and his connection with Polish intelligence. Well, what did the cooperation between Sugihara and Romer look like? Because I think there was something between. And yes, so the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. Thank you very much for being interested in the topic of Tadeusz Romer, because I have to emphasize that in Poland, Romer is not known, and it's not in the field of interest of Polish government or authorities, which is rather sad because he's a symbol of a great Polish-Japanese friendship. And we have to say, of course, I will tell about Tadeusz Romer, about his activity. But at the very beginning, I state that we can't, in this situation, talk only about one diplomat. We have to talk about something that my friend Barbara Abraham, who was the author of co-author of the exhibition I organized, said it's a humanity chain. And this is what is frequently forgotten in the narration of the story. When different nations talk about Sugihara Chiune, who you mentioned, or Jan Zwartendijk and their help to European Jews. We have to say clearly that Tadeusz Romer was an important part of this humanity chain, and he's totally not known all over the world. People think that the whole situation happened in Kaunas, the time the temporary capital of Lithuania, where Japanese consulate was established just a few months before the outbreak of World War. And one Japanese consul stayed there, and he helped the Jews. Yes and no. First of all, as you mentioned, we need to remember that establishment of the Japanese consulate in a country where there was no even single Japanese person wasn't coincidence. It was a great cooperation between Polish underground, the Polish, that time Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Polish intelligence, just for observations of Russian and German movement. But then when the war started and the Polish consulate in Kaunas was closed, all the actions of the duties of the Polish consulate were taken by the British consulate, which is also crucial here. And when what's also, in my opinion, needs a very deep research and a great interest of Polish side. After the years in the interwar period of no relations between Poland and Lithuania, Lithuanian government decided to open the borders of the country to the Polish citizens, to the Polish refugees. So without this first step of opening the borders, of letting into Lithuanian territory Polish refugees, among them there were Jews, the whole story wouldn't happen. So let's get back to Sugihara, because he's the first step, and we will meet Tadeusz Romer in Tokyo just very soon. We have to know that Romer didn't know about Sugihara, and Sugihara didn't know about Romer. They worked in just independently, and what we can find in the documentation in the archives, that Romer says that Japanese consul issued visas, but no more informations were given so far, like to Tokyo. So he asked London. Somebody knows what's going on there, but he knows that people are traveling to Japan. But still in Kaunas, the people were receiving visas from Japanese consul who didn't close the doors to the refugees and decided to issue transit visas. First of all, a lot of researchers say a lot of numbers. So like Sugihara listed 6,000 people, but we know that some of them traveled like one family on one visa. So the number is all the time counted from the beginning. New resources are just appearing. And these are the visas for both Polish and Lithuanian citizens, Polish and Lithuanian Jews. There is also in this humanity chain in Kaunas one more person, the Dutch consul, honorary consul Jan Zwartendijk, who in cooperation with with Sugihara, decided to write on the visas, on the certificates issued by British consulate, because the people didn't have transfer. Please remember, like they were mostly traveling to Vilnius. And Vilnius was part of Poland was Polish before the war. So nobody took the passports, what is very clearly seen in my interviews, for example. So they went to Kaunas, applied, because in Kaunas still the consulates were operating, and applied for the certificates in the British consulate to confirm the Polish nationality. Nobody checked if they were really Polish or not, because just British, they didn't know. Just if somebody came and applied, he received the certificate. And this is crucial when coming to the Romer's role. So then they received from Jan Zwartendijk the confirmation that no visa is necessary when they're traveling to Curacao, which was quite ridiculous, but the only option to get a transit visa via Japan. And then they went to Sugihara, who issued visas to Japan, but these were transit visas, what also is necessary to know. Meanwhile, Sugihara cooperated with Polish underground, and a lot of copies of visas were done. So the number issued by Sugihara is not equal to the number of people who are traveling and getting to Japan. But this is just, I would just here refer to Martyna Rusiniak-Karwat's research, who's researching just very strongly the falsifying process of the visas. So the people, they got their papers like certificates, guarantee that there's no visa needed to Curacao, so they're traveling to Curacao via Japan. They applied from NKVD the permissions, the permits to leave Soviet Union, because like the borders were changing at that time. And it was, Polish citizens had one choice. The rumors came from Lviv, for example, that when you are not deciding to become Soviet, you are being deported to Siberia. So the people decided in Lithuania still, where Lithuanian officers were working, to apply for going out of Soviet Union instead of taking Soviet citizenship. It was very strange that here in Vilnius, maybe because of so many Lithuanians were still working and they didn't care of letting out the Polish citizens from their territory, so many permissions were given. Of course, there was also Sugihara role, who was very active in the Soviet-Japanese relations, but it's a different story. So the people were going to Vladivostok via the transit route. And in Vladivostok, first when they came, the first people, the whole story in Kaunas took place in summer 1940. And the first groups were reaching Vladivostok late autumn, December, something like this. They came to Vladivostok. So the first people, frequently having their passports, they just entered Japan. without problems, really. They had everything what they needed very frequently. They had also the visas just gained from their friends in the US, Canada, and so on and so on. But when more and more people were coming and the spring was coming, Japanese government found out that, first of all, there was no permission to Sugihara to issue that visas. Secondly, these people are traveling with certificates and they are claiming they are Polish. And that there's too many people coming there, so what can we do? Then Japanese government decided to stop letting into the people, into the country. They said like no proper country of destination, no really final destination visa. We know it from the diaries because the story was frequently a little bit differently said by the refugees themselves, so grateful to Japanese government and to Jewish authorities. From the interviews and memoirs, we see that, wow, something is happening strange. First, the fear in Vladivostok, will they let us in or not? And then in Japan, we are staying in Japan, nobody cares about us, and we had only like 7 or 14 days transit visas, and we're staying like half a year now. So what's going on? And this is what is shown in Japanese archives and of course in Polish government's archives. Because in March, Romer wrote to Japanese government saying, these are the Polish citizens. If you let them into, I guarantee that I will get the visas for them and they will leave Japan. Before that, when the people started to come, and Tadeusz Romer, who was the person from the Dmowski circles and a very, very talented diplomat, he decided to ask for the permission to London, saying, what's going on? Like so many people, we don't know how many of them are coming. So most of them are Jews. What should I do? And London answered to him, this is your decision. Just if you let into Soviet spies pretending to be Polish Jews, you have problem. Because our relations with Japan, who is with whom we are not in officially in the best relations, then Japan joined Nazis, yes. So if you let them into Japan, so the Soviet spies pretending to be Poles, you have a problem. He decided to take this risk and give me this guarantee, and what is written, just I've even printed out, what is written in the, for example, one file from the archives from Tokyo, like there is 100 people waiting and they are not being let in, they are left in Vladivostok. And this is only the period of 3 days from 25th March till 27th March. So if I take all the responsibility for them, if you let them in, I will take care and I will just take care on my citizens. So this is the first thing he did. He was the guarantor, even though the people, Yad Vashem or the refugees themselves, they say like he didn't risk his position, he didn't risk his life. He was a diplomat, you know, he was our ambassador, so what could he do? In Japan, he confirmed the nationality of those people, which is crucial. Because then, when Japan was entering the war with the US, he organized people and moved them to Shanghai, of course, agreeing this with Japanese authorities. He went to Shanghai as well, but before he sent almost 1,000, it's like a little like 800 something people all over the world, to Canada, New Zealand, Australia, because he had good friends in the embassies, and he got these visas for them. So they left when the Pacific was still not under Japanese control. And with the rest, he went to Shanghai. When the war started, and Shanghai, I think, is the most important part of the whole story and what Romer did, because he was a great organizer. And when almost 1,000 Polish people, Polish citizens, stayed in Shanghai, among those about who Mr. Karwen talked a moment ago, because some of those who went from the German Reich, out from the German Reich, went also to Shanghai, which was quite safe destination. And the problem among researchers is that for general audience, those people who were in Shanghai, they are basically Jews. Frequently without nationality, because they lost their German or Austrian before nationality. But those who were Polish, they had their nationality. So they benefited not only from Jewish organizations' help, but also from Polish help from for the Polish refugees. But when the war with the US started, the Pacific War, Japan said no more money from the US. This is the enemy. And from where were the money for Jews in Shanghai? From the US. And once again, here we come with the question of Switzerland, with the question of help and Polish government. The Jewish organizations agreed with Polish government that they will pay the money in Washington for the Polish embassy. The money were transferred to London, from London to Bern, then to Kuibyshev in Soviet Union, and to Shanghai. And Romer was responsible for this. So he was, the head of this organization of paying money and supporting. Nobody remembers it. Everybody remembers that, joint paid. Yes, but they couldn't pay into the Japanese territory, and Shanghai was occupied by Japan from the Sino-Japanese War. And nobody remembers that this was the Polish role, the Polish roles here, and basically Romer's role. The question of money is very, very crucial here. So we have the money transfer issue. We have also organizing these 1,000 people in Shanghai, because they were left with their nationality, and they were divided into different groups, which were confirmed by Romer to represent the Polish citizens in front of Japanese authorities. And those refugees became responsible, and they were cooperating with Japanese to, for example, open some, if they could open a shop or work or whatever. They didn't need the consulate, who was evacuated because, of course, Poland couldn't stay in Shanghai because of being allied with Britain, with the US. So the whole consulate and some of the refugees were evacuated to Africa and then further. But the organized community stayed, and it could, for example, take the money from from bank accounts transferred frequently from Kuibyshev, where Romer then became the ambassador of Poland to the Soviet Union. So he never forgot about those refugees. And to summarize, I would like to say that first of all, the refugees see him as a normal diplomat who did his job. Yes, he did, but he didn't have to. He could give those passports, leave them with the Jewish organization help, then stopped, and go back to London where he became then the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But to show the role he played that is not seen, we need to remember that when war was over, Romer was left in London. He couldn't come back to Poland. And he first lived his life from his savings. And no opportunities really, as a lot of people from Polish government in exile had. The US ambassador came to him, the one who was the ambassador in Japan. And he said, I know what you did for those people. And he just found a work for him in Canada at McGill University in Montreal. And Romer moved them, just doing his research work. So these words, I know what you did for those people, I think are crucial. Even though the refugees, they don't see the efforts he has done to make these people, especially in Shanghai, life easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to add one question. So, because this story, as you said, is completely or nearly completely unknown. And how did you research it? I mean, how did you uncover this? It is written in his memoirs, or?
Yes, just we can say that it is totally unknown because I researched Sugihara firstly under the supervision of Professor Ewa Polish-Rutkowska, who researched Polish underground and who, as the first person, wrote about Tadeusz Romer, but she was just focusing on the Polish-Japanese relations. I was focusing on Jewish refugees, and this helped. So when I started my cooperation with Barbara Abraham, I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, she said, like, she came to me and said, like, I have a few newspapers from Shanghai. And I said, like, wow, I have like very few, but they are considered as being burned in the fear of Japanese because Polish people, they published press in Shanghai. So she said, like, no, I have it. So I received it from refugees because she's Australian citizen and she used to live with one family in Australia. So we started to search just deeper and deeper. And first of all, we came out from the newspapers when we saw the great, the whole organization. Yes, when we saw people were announcing that the Romer is organizing a meeting, please come. And then like we saw certain amounts of money. We saw that this transfer came from Romer or came from Poland. And we can just meet in the dining hall, in the canteen, and we will share the food among us. And we said like, wow, there's something more. So we started to go through the archives. And this is, I say here just in front of everybody that this is not only my job. I just try to make these puzzles together, but I benefit a lot from the international cooperation. My friends who are researchers, Lithuanians who help me with Lithuanian sources, Japanese who even now in the Corona times, they search for me the archives and finding new ideas. So I think we made a beautiful network of the researchers. And when we put all the puzzles together, it became obvious. But yes, the inspiration came from the newspapers that you read like in every book about the Jewish refugees in Shanghai. It's like, yes, there was a Polish press, but it was burned in the fear of Japan. So I have, with Barbara, we have, I think we are looking only one from all the issues that there were. So from this reading deeply what the people were saying, what was going on, we just came to the archives and just put the puzzles together.
Amazing story. Thank you very much. And now Monika Maniewska. We are in Bern, in Switzerland, a very, in fact, now very famous story, but could you tell us more? Who were these Polish diplomats in Bern? Who were members of the Ładoś group? What was the operation in Switzerland about? And yes, and how and when did the action of forging passports by the Polish embassy in Bern begin?
Sure. Good evening. There are so many links between Bern and Shanghai, and it's incredible to listen to the story of Tadeusz Romer. I guess we'll back to them, but at first, the Latin American passports and the operation on them, it was well known, but it was always connected to Jewish organizations. People, survivors on the passports, knew nothing about the passports apart from the name of the consul whose signature was on the document. Only after we discovered Swiss archives, the whole operation became clear. It was there where we found an investigation against honorary consul of Paraguay, Rudolf Hugli. It was an investigation conducted by the Swiss police in 1943. Rudolf Hugli was accused of making profit of selling blank documents and visas. And members of the Ładoś group testified during this investigation, and from their account we learned about how much the Polish legation was involved in the passport operation. Maybe I will tell you more about who were the members of the Ładoś group, and it's a name given to a group of Polish diplomats and Jewish activists. They created an illegal system of production of Latin American passports aimed at saving Jews from occupied Europe, not only Poland. The group consisted of 4 diplomats from Polish legation in Bern in Switzerland and 2 representatives of Jewish organizations. The key to success the action was the role of the Polish envoy, Aleksander Ładoś. He knew about the plot, he approved it, and he gave his cooperators political protection, and he intervened when they needed him the most. There was also Konstanty Rokicki, a vice consul of the Polish legation in Bern. He was the one who filled out the majority of the Paraguayan passports. Stefan Reniewicz, also a member of the Ładoś group, he was a consul and the deputy head of the Polish legation. He was involved in passport operation. Probably he was in direct contact with Rudolf Hugli, so this Paraguayan consul, and he corresponded with Hayom. I will tell about Hayom more later. He also, like Ładoś, intervened when they really needed him. Juliusz Kuhl, he also had a key role in producing the Latin American passport. He had a lot of contact with Jewish community in Switzerland. He was the main point of contact for Jewish families who were trying to rescue their family members. I assume that together with Konstanty Rokicki and Stefan Reniewicz, they prepared the documents, picked them up from the Rudolf Hugli from the Paraguayan consulate, gathered personal data and filled them in. Abraham Silvershein was a co-founder of the Relico Committee. It was established in Geneva. It was a committee for relief of the war-stricken Jewish population, which main goal was to save Jews. His private archive, which we found in Yad Vashem, is the most valuable source for this research. He delivered personal data and photographs of people who needed help. He also organized a financial base for the whole operation. He remained in the contact with the Polish diplomats. Hayom was also responsible for distribution of the passports in occupied Europe. He collected information about people who needed help, and also he was funding the operation. He was one of the founders of Agudat Israel. He transferred information between all the Agudat Israel officers, so London, Istanbul, New York. He knew who needed to be helped, and he could receive a photograph of a person from family members from Aguda. His major rescue efforts centered on sending passports to the ghettos. What else? How these passports worked? Jews who found themselves in the territory occupied by the Soviets, because at first passports were issued in 1939 and 1940. And they were supposed to help Jews who were trapped in the Soviet-occupied territories. When person received such document, it opened a way for them to escape. They were treated as foreigners by Soviets, not Poles, but they were like for them Paraguayans. That means that they were not a subject to the restrictions imposed on Poles. Most importantly, they could travel. They only lacked a transit visa, and here we can speak about, for example, Chun Sugihara. It gave them a chance to escape if they received such a visa. In case of the territories occupied by Germans, it wasn't so easy. I mean, it depends on the period what we're speaking about. In the early in the war, as foreigners, they could move to the Aryan side or even get out of the occupied country. Later, Germans put them into internment camps, and they did not end in the extermination camps. It was such camps like Titmonik or Vitel, where they had the chance to get exchanged for Germans arrested by Allied forces. The passport increased survivor chances. That was its main issue. What else? As I said, the operation started. We at first thought that the operation started when the Sternburg family. Sternburg family is, I think, well known also in Shanghai because they helped Shanghai Jews and they sent money to Shanghai to rescue those Jews. So at first we thought that Guta Sternburg in 1941 was the first passport which was issued. But in the Swiss investigation, as I told you about, Julius Kult testified, and I will quote here, that the question of how we could obtain foreign passport for Polish citizens was raised for the first time after the occupation of Poland by Germany and Russia at the end of 1939 and the beginning of 1940. The main idea was to remove certain people about whom we had concerns from the part of territories occupied by Russia. It was possible due to the fact that the Consul Hugli issued Paraguayan passport to these people. Passport forms were each time collected from Hugli, then issued by Consul Rokicki, and then returned to Consul Hugli for signature. End of quote. Today, thanks to discoveries in German archives, we know that the first passport was issued in May 1940. And it confirms what Julius Hugli told, that the action started earlier than we thought, even a year earlier than we thought.
And how did it change that the passports were forged not only for Polish Jews, but also for European Jews? It was from the beginning, or it has changed during?
I mean, at first, I think it was sent to occupied Poland, but then the whole action went abroad. So they tried to serve German and Dutch Jews. In our research, I mean, Dr. Silvershein in 1944, at the beginning of the 1944, said that they saved at least 10,000 people. I mean, that they were saved by such passports. During our research, we estimated that the number of people who received such document was from 8,000 to 10,000. So his calculations were pretty good. On the Ładoś list, we identified more than 3,000 people. 94% of them were Jews from Poland, the Netherlands, and Germany. Most of the survivors on the passports were German and Dutch, which was, in our research, quite a revelation, because it means that Ładoś Group and his Ładoś Group saved the lives of hundreds of people of another state, not Polish Jews.
But another question, in comparison to what Dr. Barbasiewicz said and to this story in Leipzig, can we say about very directly cooperation with Polish government in London? So was it the individual decision of Ładoś, or it was also planned or supported by Polish government in exile?
Okay. At first, they had to act on their own. I mean, it was like, I think such spontaneous actions were carried out without government's knowledge at first. But at time, the government knew about the action. Polish government knew from May 1943, and they didn't know this from Ładoś. According to the ciphered message, which were sent from Bernd to London, we know that Polish government in exile knew that from Jewish organizations, and they asked Ładoś about it. And he said that, yes, this is true. And then they asked him to prepare more documents, Latin American passports, for 62 Polish Jews. That means that they accepted the action. Further, I think in June it was, they also spoke to send a message to Ładoś that they would like to finance this passport operation. So at first it was their individual action, but they got support from the government.
Okay, thank you very much. We listened about the operation in Switzerland, but we are listening to humanity chain all over the Europe, in fact, because we see many connections between these stories. And yes, now I would like to take us to Turkey. And there was an aphorism circulating in Lvov. A man consists of a body, a soul, and a passport. And those who could save Jews from extermination were precisely those who could issue documents. So Eldad, you have written about, of course, the Ładoś operation many times, but recently you wrote about the completely new case of Consul Rychlewicz, unknown in Poland, unknown in the world, of course, also unknown in the world of science. Could you introduce us to this figure? I mean, what documents did Rychlewicz issue, forge, or how did it work? This action?
Yes, good evening to you from Haifa, the beautiful port city in the northern part of Israel, which actually played also a role in the story of Rychlewicz, due to the fact that a large number of those who were given forged documents by Rychlewicz managed to get to Haifa, which was at the time. The details of these, I would like to point out two points that seem to me quite important and very clearly in the story of Rychlewicz and his operation. First of all, and I think that it's quite evident from what we've heard so far in the different panels. When we are talking about diplomats who saved Jews during the war, we are talking about individual cases. The number of cases that we have of Polish diplomats that have been involved in operations to save Jews are very evidently not anymore individual, even if they started as individual operations. At a certain stage, they involved more diplomats in other countries, more Polish diplomats in other countries, and I can presume only that such a large-scale operation, or I would say large-scale operations in plural, could not have escaped the agreement and the authorization, the attention and the authorization of the Polish government. In the case of Rychlewicz and the operation, the Turkish operation, we have first of all the involvement of the Romanian representation of the Polish exiled government. And we also have cables which indicate very clearly that two representations in Israel, one, the consulate in Tel Aviv and the consulate in Jerusalem, were also very much involved in this operation, in sending names, in asking for documents. The main problem that I believe we're facing in trying to build up the whole story of the Turkish operation and maybe the whole story of the Polish operation for the rescue of Jews is the fact that we do not know where can we find the archives of the two consulates that I've mentioned in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, which could have given a very important light on the extent of what has happened. The second thing that has to be pointed out is the fact that we are dealing with a situation in which, first of all, the British government was doing everything to put obstacles in front of Jews trying to leave the occupied countries by Nazi Germany, and mainly officially doing all what they can to prevent Jews from entering the so-called mandate area of Palestine, Eretz Israel. And then two of the escape routes or the transit routes from Turkey to then mandate Palestine were through areas controlled by the Vichy government, because one of the transit routes was going through the port of Beirut, and from Beirut they went to Haifa, and the other possibility was to leave Turkey through Syria and to get also to the port of Haifa and then to settle down here. And these two routes were closed, were active as long as France was a free country. From the summer of 1940 on, once the French give in to the Germans and Vichy is taking control of the colonies abroad, these two roads are being immediately closed, which means that we have here a situation where France and England, Great Britain, are actually doing everything not to allow Jews to get into Palestine, while as the Polish side is doing quite a lot to enable Jews fleeing mainly from Poland to get into Palestine. Now, how was that possible? And here comes the information about the operation of Wojciech Ryklewicz. In order to go around the limitations put by the authorities of the British Mandate, which did not allow, which allowed a very limited number of Jews to enter Eretz Israel, Palestine, in a period of 10 years. Ryklewicz was actually issuing documents that were testifying that those persons who were wishing to travel to Palestine were actually Catholics. So he was giving them false religious documents, which, by the way, were also needed. The whole story started with an elderly American Jew lady who lived in Los Angeles, who decided to write the story of her life, how she actually escaped Europe in the 30s, and in a small booklet which she gave to her grandsons for their bar mitzvah. And there she speaks about a certain Polish consul in Istanbul, which enabled her and her father to get falsified Christian documents in order to leave to Brazil. What happened at the time was that Brazil allowed the number of 10,000 Christian Polish to immigrate, who fled Poland because of the Nazi and the Russian immigration, to immigrate to Brazil. But you had to show that you were a Christian. So actually what happened to this elderly lady, she went with her father, she meets some acquaintance of her in the street, somebody, a Christian Pole, who tells her, listen, there is this possibility, because they were trying desperately to get any visa that they could. And he tells them, this acquaintance, listen, there is a great number of visas available for Christians to go to Brazil. Go to Liepzig, to the Polish consul, and he is going to give you the necessary documents which state that you are actually Catholic. And with this, you can get a visa to Brazil, which they did get, but at the end, they didn't use it. But I suppose that many others did. Now, we do not, unfortunately, know too much about the Liepzig operation. We are starting to learn about the depth of it. We cannot give exact numbers of how many people were saved by this operation. We know about some hundreds of people. We, until now, unlike the case of the Lados group, we did not get yet many reactions of people coming from families who were saved through this operation. However, I do think that we are at the beginning of discovering this story. So maybe through such conference as we have today, people will wake up and come up with their personal stories.
Thank you very much. I think I see that there are questions, but before I will read them, and if someone would like to ask, of course, our panelists, please write the question in the Q&A section. Because all these stories are completely amazing, and perhaps all of us heard this about Yad Vashem exhibition that has been open in Australia. It's, I think, an old one devoted to diplomats who saved Jews. I think all these diplomats who were righteous among the nation, and there is no Polish diplomats in this exhibition. And I would like to ask, it's a very simple question, because we were discussing a little bit, we were here listening to how these stories were unknown, and now we are uncovering them, discovering them. So perhaps it's very simple and not very clever question, but why is there no mention of any Polish diplomat in this exhibition? No, are there any specific reasons? Was the status of Polish diplomats more complicated, perhaps? Do you have any idea? And it's about our that we are on the way of the research, and we still are uncovering many things that were unknown. Or perhaps Eldad, would you like to be first? Or
my understanding is that at the time that the exhibition on diplomats that saved Jews started, and I believe it was in the UN and not in Australia, but maybe I'm wrong. The information that we have today about those different cases, especially the 4 cases that we have mentioned in this panel discussion, were unknown. So we are mainly talking about people who were involved in passing on information to the allies about the extermination of Jews that was happening on Polish soil by Germans and other collaborators. And people who had a different, a diplomatic past, but you could not combine their contribution to those of the diplomats who were really using their diplomatic forces or abilities in order to save Jews. Now the situation is different. And this is where I am asking myself questions about the insistence of Yad Vashem not to rush and acknowledge and recognize the the extent of the operations of rescue that were done by Polish diplomats. I think that in the case of Lados, I can say it from my personal information. I think that the case was badly prepared, and the person who prepared this case actually didn't understand what was the which role was played by whom, because the first reaction that I had from Yad Vashem on the decision regarding Rokitsky said that Rokitsky was the superior diplomat in the legation, while Lados was under him, which means that somebody really didn't read the documents. I don't understand why, knowing now the information that we have, and I believe that Yad Vashem has all this information by now, why they did not retract their decision and recognize also Lados and the others as just of the nations. And also in the case of Istanbul, of Rechlevich, I think that by now they should have done a quicker analysis of the information that we have, and should have reached the conclusion that he definitely deserves this decision. However, I must say that I have also seen this inefficiency of Yad Vashem in other cases which do not have to do with Poland, but with other countries.
Thank you very much. Perhaps someone would like to add something or comment?
If I can, I would be very happy to add, but it will be, let's say, controversial. I claim from my experience, and of course I'm not that into like Australian case, only Japanese case, that this is also a problem of Poland and its promotion and our promotion of those people. I was honored to participate it was 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago in Vilnius, in the negotiations. I was invited by that time the director of Polish Institute in Vilnius, Mr. Marcin Łapczyński, to negotiate with Japanese to just recognize Romer. And there was a success. After 1 year, Japanese said, yes, we got it, we searched our archives, that's great. I was asked to prepare the exhibition. You were introducing me just because of it, and this exhibition became a beautiful panel exhibition. It was shown in almost 20 locations, like Lithuania, Japan. It's going now. This is a part of a part of Humanity Refugees Museum in Tsuruga, Japan. I sent many letters to Ministry of Culture, to all the saints, and just imagine, I'm so happy that you invited me here, because I can talk about Romer. Nobody was interested in the exhibition in Poland, and nobody seen this exhibition in Poland, which I think we should just start. Like, I'm so just happy that Dr. Kumo is promoting Ładoś, and now we know Ładoś in Poland. But Romer, nobody knows Romer. Even single street is known Romer, and the exhibition that was prepared from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs money, it's very popular in Japan, in other countries like North America, Japan, so Asia, or Lithuania itself, which is very interested in promoting Sugihara, not Romer, because it is the base for the Lithuanian-Japanese relations, but no one in Poland. So this was my, let's say, controversial saying. I'm not.
No, it's not controversial. I must say that I think it's always the problem how we understand our history, and it's like about this conference. Most of the stories were discovered 2-3 years ago, so it's not just only about what is today, but also about why it, we were waiting so many years for this these moments. But you please feel invited to Berlin with your exhibition. I saw the photos on the Polish Institute in Vilnius, and I like it very much. It was a very beautiful exhibition.
It was opened on the occasion of the crowning ceremony of the emperor by the First Lady of Poland, and still. So I will be very happy to visit to send it to Berlin, but still I'm waiting for Poland.
So there is a question from, perhaps someone would like to add something about this exhibition or comment what was said by Dr.
Yes, I would like to say that sometimes you have to be a little bit patient. When in 2000 we started, well, I was beginner at my job here. We started with an exhibition about Liepzig and the Polen Aktion, and there was a plate commemoration plate mounted in the former Polish consulate. This was a first step, and later on there were different projects when other actors from Leipzig took part, and the story got more popular. So there was an exhibition about Jewish life in Leipzig in the Radziejowska house, and they came to me and asked for some materials and some information, and so they put it into this exhibition. And there was another project called Remembering Leipzig, where there's a virtual map from Leipzig, and you can find a lot of stories told there. So when you start start bringing this information around, others have also need some time to find out that it's true. By the way, in the beginning of the remembering of this Polen Aktion, we had good partners like the Jewish community here in Leipzig and the Simon Dubno Institute for History of Jews in Eastern Europe. And I think it's also about cooperation. So maybe it takes just a little bit more time.
Thank you. So perhaps in this moment, I would like to read the question from Heidi Fishman. Do you think that the fact that we are a more global world now with internet connectivity has made research more productive? Perhaps someone would like to comment. Monika, you were researching so many archives to find out the story about Ładoś.
Hanna, can you repeat the question, because there was some mix with my internet and I didn't hear the last.
Do you think that the fact that we are a more global world now with internet connectivity has made research more productive?
Yeah, for sure. We should now take Ładoś to Australia for them to change this exhibition, because I'm assuming it's not, I don't know, it wasn't modified or updated, because Konstanty Rokicki was received a title of Righteous Among the Nations only in 2019, so 2 years ago. But with the internet, maybe pandemic is a bit hard for us to get into archives, but thanks to internet connection and debates such as this, more people may know more about such diplomats. And we can also say something about one another who was before Felix Hiczewski in Leipzig. It was Tadeusz Brzeziński, who received a letter, a thankful letter from Menachem Begin, a minister of Israel in 1978, because of his efforts to help Jews in Liepzig before Felix Hiczewski, and he should also be on this exhibition. So I hope we will learn more about all those diplomats. Thanks to internet.
Thank you very much. So perhaps yes,
small answer for it's quite example, very easy. I found the Ládós list, and I found 4 names based in Leipzig, and now we are going to find out a little bit more about their stories here in Leipzig, because we try. I'm a poor researcher. It's not my main occupation, but maybe we'll find something out about the families Adler, Milij-Jaroszynski, and Mr. Boni, I think. So it's very easy to scroll a list by computer, to find names, to find people who are connected to Leipzig. And also in preparation of this, I found a family picture depicted by Helga Eldad, and she wrote, there's Ernst and Steffa Ohrmann, a couple that emigrated to Uruguay. And here again, I'm wondering whether there was Polish diplomacy in Bern underway, or whether in other towns, other networks were dealing to make it possible to emigrate, or whether this was an early emigration to Uruguay. So to get back to Heidi's question, yes, it's much more easier.
Thank you very much. So perhaps in the end, I would like to perhaps ask the one of the most important questions when we are talking about diplomats. I have found that Sugihara wrote in his memoirs that what he did was out of a sense of humanity, out of love for his fellow men. And this intelligence agent Daszkiewicz, he noted about Sugihara that he was a man with a good heart. So always when we talk about, it's always very interesting to look for reasons why someone does something good, and you all mentioned about these reasons, or you were trying to understand and find out how did it started. But perhaps there is another question, this second one, and what were the dangers they faced in every case? I mean, because when we talk about this duty and responsibility and solidarity, they took risk. So perhaps that was, I would like to ask for at the end, and perhaps everyone would like to make also a brief comment to sum up our discussion. Bernd, perhaps you are first.
Well, I think for Radziejowski, the risks were still small because it was what he did was before war. But of course, he was interned with beginning of Second World War, and well, he was lucky to get away. I think. Actually, we know that also situations like these could escalate if, for example, German police, Gestapo, SS would have entered the situations. And of course, knowing the further development of the whole history, Herschel Grünspan killing a diplomat in German embassy in Paris because he was angry about this Polen-Aktion, which led to Kristallnacht. So we had to well, it was a escalation of this situation, which also the Nazis tried to exploit as much as they could in propaganda terms. But I think this, if Radziejowski would have acted in another way, this wouldn't have changed. And he maybe took also the risk of, well, acting a little bit without consultation with Berlin and Warsaw. But he had not such a big risk that time, I think.
Thank you. Monika, Maniewska.
In case of Ładoś and his associates, they could have been expelled, of course, and or became a person non grata, but they were in neutral Switzerland, and Switzerland was surrounded by Germans, by territories occupied by Germany. So I don't know what would happen. I think Germans would just kill them if they knew about the action, and if they would be expelled from Switzerland. And to sum up, I recently spoke with Roger Moorhouse. He's a British historian who's writing a book about the Ładoś activities. And we were thinking about the Switzerland and why they did that, and I think, and I agree with Roger at this, that there were the right place, the right people, and the right time. Maybe not the time is not the best way to express this, but it was like this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olga Barbasiewicz.
Yes, this is a very difficult question, and this is what is stated by the refugees, by Yad Vashem, that Romer didn't risk. He risked letting into, for sure, the spies from Soviet Union, but he did all his best to confirm the nationality with all the possible ways. And luckily, he managed to let into Polish refugees, Polish Jews. But when we talk about him, why? Of course, I'm totally aware that you need to risk your life. But didn't he save the lives of many of them just organizing the financial aid when the refugees who were interviewed said, like, the people were starving, Chinese were starving on the streets, and Jewish, they received help. And this was because of the Romers' activity. So he risked his position. If he let into Soviet spies, he would lose his position for sure. But this whole humanity chain, this whole beautiful story was based on great Polish-Japanese friendship and the great brain and idea of Tadeusz Romer. So he helped provided help to a lot of people, and for sure saved those who didn't stay at Siberia with Soviets and those who didn't starve in Shanghai.
Thank you very much. And Eldad, Beck.
Yeah, I'll just start with a small correction because Menachem Begin was mentioned before. 1978, he was already prime minister. He was also of Polish descendants, and he arrived to Eretz Israel 1942 with the Polish army, which brought many Jews to then mandate Palestine, Eretz Israel, which was also a way to save Jews. Now, obviously, all the diplomats were taking a personal risk, because once the police, the local police, finds out that you are involved in illegal activities, you're risking quite a lot. But we also have to take into account that they were not only risking their personal status and position, they were also risking the position of the Polish government in exile, because in the case of Turkey, which was a neutral country, which was also the case of Switzerland, the discovery of such large-scale activities could have had repercussions on the diplomatic relations of the government in exile with the hosting governments, which means that we have here two levels of risks. And this is why I really think that since we are talking about so many cases in so many different countries, saving so many lives, and taking such a risk, I cannot imagine that they would have done such large-scale operation without the involvement and the agreement of high-level officials in the government in exile, which understood the risk that it was taking by allowing these operations.
Thank you very much. We are really, I think it's 8 o'clock, so we are out of time. And well, thank you very much for participating in our discussion. Thank you very much to our audience. I would like to remind you that you can find a lot of interesting information on our special website dedicated to the Ładoś group, Passports for Life. Today was premiere of the second edition of this website. And all recordings of today's conference can be found on our Facebook and on our YouTube. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to our guests. I wish everyone a good evening and stay safe, stay healthy.